Hi, I'm Meta Spencer. This is a schmooze day, and so I was just telling my guests that I don't know what we're going to talk about because that's the way schmooze days are. I put people together who don't necessarily know each other and who may not have much in common. And then we see what they want to talk about, and it always works out. We always have an interesting conversation. So in Santiago, Chile, we have Hugo Benedetti, who's a professor.
Hello, everyone.
Yeah. And Hugo's been on before. I asked him to explain cryptocurrency to me once. I thank you, Hugo, for your effort.
You're welcome.
Near Washington, D.C. is Paul Werbos. Paul is, I sometimes, not facetiously, but kind of really refer to him as the father of the new AI. And he would probably not accept that.
Oh, there's no problem with that, actually.
You'd like that?
I can defend that.
All right, very good. In Florida, where Orlando, is it Maria?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Is Maria Puerta Riera, who's a Venezuelan political scientist who's been, I guess, an immigrant to the U.S. a number of years ago and now teaches at a community college in Florida and also in Puerto Rico, I guess remotely. Hugo, what about you? What would you most like to discuss today?
We could talk about how cryptocurrencies can undermine the power of the government in terms of controlling local currency. That's one. And that's something that we have seen in countries like Venezuela, like Argentina, and we could potentially see it in Brazil, depending on who gets elected next.
So, Paul, what's on your mind?
What is the future of Chile? And how that relates to global energy and economic issues. And I got lots of slides together for that. If anybody, I got a million slides we could share if you're interested in that. But the issue of blockchain and cryptocurrency is also a very big deal, as you say.
And I, at least, am very interested in discussing Chilean energy policy. So, yeah.
Well, okay, that's a common issue. I suspect everybody's interested in their fuel bills in Chile this week.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
In fact, the news I read says that inflation has become a really big issue in Chile this week. But
it's also around the world, but we have a little bit of extra, just like in the US. And we can discuss about why we have extra inflation and not just old regular inflation.
I am interested in why El Salvador's president, Bukele, has this, and I think he shares this millennial sort of persona that is looking to go beyond with traditional patterns of government and political communication. He's also into Bitcoin. I think he's the first. It would be the first formal like adoption by a country in at least in Latin America, right? And there are so many. I guess there is a lot of apprehension with him and how he has so far led El Salvador. So I guess I would be very interested in hearing from you what you think about that.
Now, before we go further, I have a newcomer who's joined us, Peter Vinton. Hello, Peter. Good morning. I'm glad you're
Peter.
us.
Thank you, Meta. This is
Peter.
The first time I've joined your talk show.
Yeah, well, it's I wasn't sure you're going to be here. But Peter Vinton is an economist also. He's the he's the treasurer of the Canadian Pugwash Group. So that's the main way in which I know him.
There is probably a role of countries with large resources of energy, whether it's petrol or solar power, like we'll probably have in the future, that sort of shapes the way that their governments can run the country. To me, Venezuela has always been like my example of how having large resources, it can all go downhill at some point. And maybe it did go downhill because it had too many resources and that were not used like they have been used in other countries. But you also see it in countries like in the Middle East with large resources that have governments that behave very differently from other countries with large resources, like, I don't know, Norway. So maybe that's also a good way to discuss how energy policies can affect democracies and governments. And then we can merge it with the role of cryptocurrencies as a counter to government policies.
One of the groups I'm very proud to be connected to is the International Advisory Board of Chile's Solar Energy Research Consortium. It's a great effort all across universities across Chile, and they have developed technologies which is the most advanced in the world. And in my talk to the foreign ministry last week, the key point I tried to put forward is that Chile has unique advantages critical for the climate and energy picture of the entire world. And we're discussing about what those unique advantages are and the cultural and political problem of getting the information to people who need to know better, like von der Leyen and the EU. When I look at their current plan for reducing fossil fuel consumption, they're trying hard, and they clearly are not living up to the best of what's available. And there are ways that they could move a lot better. I think it's because the information is not getting from where it's real to where it's needed.
So let me explain what the link within energy and blockchain and Bitcoin in particular, because it, as some of you may know, Bitcoin is very energy intense protocol. So the way the Bitcoin protocol works is you have a lot of computers that are putting in random numbers until they found a correct, very large random number. You need a lot of computers to do that. It's a very energy intense process. So now consumption is, I think last time I checked, it was probably like Norway. So it's a small country worth of energy consumption just to find random numbers. So
they said it uses Bitcoin uses something like twice as much energy as the entire country of Sweden. So it's really not good for the environment.
I mean, it's really increasing. Now here's the take on it. So we could find a better use for the energy, but let's just suppose that Bitcoin is consuming this energy and it's probably going to keep consuming more and more energy in the future. Okay, so let's take that for granted.
Right.
Now, here's where green energy comes in, or renewable energy. One of the problems that we have in Chile, and here Paul might chip in because I might be totally wrong, but solar energy production at its peak, it's during the day, not at night, and energy consumption, it's at its peak, mostly in the evening, maybe in the night.
Yeah.
So the problems that we have is the production and consumption don't match, and you have either waste of energy during the day, or you have to store it somehow. So you can store it in batteries, you can store it as a different kind of power, so you can turn it to steam and use it as steam later. Again, Paul might improve my answer.
I agree 100% with what you're saying. Time of day.
Now,
any good energy economist or electric power economist knows that time of day effects are just absolutely central to that whole industry.
Yeah.
Now what is where does Bitcoin come in? Is that some companies decided, well, instead of just wasting this energy or spending money to put it in a battery so I can sell it or inject it into the system during the night, I can use this energy to mine Bitcoin during the day. With all the extra energy, the energy that the system's not using, I can use it to mine Bitcoin, sell this Bitcoin, and get extra income. Now, this process is making a lot of projects that were not viable before, it's making them viable, because they could produce a lot of energy, but they couldn't sell all the energy that they produce. So all this extra energy was going to waste. Now they can turn it into Bitcoin, which eventually can be sold, which makes their projects profitable. So now we could have more green energy that's not going to be used directly in the cities, but we're going to have the plants already built. So when the time comes for us to use that energy, or we find a cheaper way of storing energy, we already have the plans in place. So that's one. And the other thing is that this, as you mentioned, is one of the most energy intense industries in the world. Okay. Now, who has the most incentives to find cheaper ways of producing energy? This industry. So I think that, so for instance, Bitcoin, the fastest development of hardware that's specialized just for this use case, which is the ASICs, it was a hardware that was designed just to figure out random numbers for the Bitcoin blockchain. So they were extremely good at designing new things in order to mine Bitcoin faster and get higher returns. So I think that it's most likely, since energy is so important for the protocol, that this industry is going to come up with new alternatives, either of storing energy or producing energy, because there is so much at stake. There is so much at stake, not just because of energy costs, but of industry backlash, because consumers are saying, we don't want to buy Bitcoin if it's at the cost of charcoal or other dirty energy production, right? We don't want that. We want green energy. So you Bitcoin guys better come up with an alternative, or otherwise we're just not going to use it. So those are the two reasons why I'm optimistic about Bitcoin as a way to transform green energy, both as a ways of storing energy and making plants become profitable, but also because of the potential R&D that can be funded by Bitcoin, because they have so much at stake if they can find cheaper alternatives.
One of the problems with Bitcoin and these cryptocurrencies that I've learned is that, of course, they end run, or they're independent of the central banking system controlling currency, and so therefore, on the assumption that the central banking is operating in the public interest, cryptocurrency is a bit of a problem, and it needs to be regulated by the central bank.
You know, I'd like to ask a question right here, because I read a quotation by Warren Buffett, who said, when asked what he thought about cryptocurrency, or whether he was talking about a specific one called Bitcoin, I don't know, but he said it's rat poison squared. He really doesn't like it. Now, he didn't, in that quotation, he didn't explain why. Is it because of what you just said, Peter, or do other people think that there are other reasons for regarding it as dangerous?
Well, it is also can lead to destabilization in the financial markets, is what I've heard. Maybe that's what Warren Buffett was negatively exposed to, since he's basically in the business of understanding capital markets and exploiting his knowledge for that purpose. But I'm only speculating on the connection with rat poison.
Yeah. So one of the things
it is highly energy. As Hugo says, it does require an enormous amount of energy, and the hope is that in the future, that cost will be used for better technology that will reduce the cost of greening the economy. But I mean, that's a hypothetical. I mean, it's a projection, I guess. That
yeah. So one thing that I always like to talk about when we compare Bitcoin or cryptocurrencies to fiat currencies or central bank issued currencies is that when we compare them to the Canadian dollar, to the US dollar, to the euro, of course, they will come out last place, right? So cryptocurrencies cannot compete because, for instance, they cannot adjust their issuance to mimic what a central bank would do in order to either to control inflation or to jumpstart the economy. So you take away the monetary power of the central bank.
Right.
Now, the problem is what happens when you compare them with countries like Venezuela. I'm sorry, I'm not picking on Venezuela, but it's just a good example. Or Argentina, when as a citizen, if you put your money in your bank, you don't know if you're going to be able to take it out, and you don't know how much it's going to be worth when you take it out, and you can't purchase a foreign currency because there are capital controls. So you really don't have much alternative to turn into other assets. So you can either try to buy dollars in the black market, or you can buy gold and rings and things like that to keep something that is stable value.
This is part of a conversation in Venezuela. The government, Maduro, has shown interest, and they already had within the environment of the communal councils and the communal power, there was this idea of having each one its own currency. Okay, but the financial economic crisis in Venezuela is older than the sanctions. So
I'm sorry, when you say each its own currency, you're talking about each country has its own currency?
No. In Venezuela, we have this proposal of participative democracy with communal councils being kind of the backbone of the communal power. Each communal council would be a small community that would have its own government. It would run its own finances, and they would have their own currency. Okay, yeah. So they tried that. It didn't work. But it didn't work not just because there was an economic crisis. It's because this is a very disorganized, proposal. They were very corrupt. I ran a project, and I found during 3 years its own controller. The own political the own government had its own surveillance. And they found that there was so much corruption within these, councils that, it was just, you could audit that because the president of the council would buy an SUV, the other would travel. You would have no way to control and they would have a ton of money. So they thought this type of own currency would help. It didn't work. Of course, this is a long time ago. I've been here in the US for 7 years, so I don't know if that's even worse. But my point is that Maduro has floated the idea of this again. Not these currencies for these communal councils, but something, like, I don't know if it's Bitcoin, if it's cryptocurrency. I don't know really what each stands for. But my question is, we have an oil-based economy that is, it's not in ruins because of the sanctions. It's in ruins because 20-something years ago, or when Chavez decided to fire everyone, we lost a lot of know-how. We lost a lot of people who ran that industry. We lost more than 20,000 workers, but we lost more than that. We lost knowledge, know-how, skills. So the problem is that we always refer to Venezuela as, a powerhouse in oil, but because of the sanctions, no. The sanctions worsen things. I won't discuss that. I've written about this. Sanctions don't work for regime change. They just, try to bend some knees and try to force a change in behavior, but they don't help regime change. But the problem is that this economy, oil-based economy, has been deteriorating for a while. And if there's a connection between the energy sector and these currencies, I'm wondering how that's going to work in a country with an economy in shambles, like so weak. I mean, in Venezuela, my family has to deal with everyday expenses in dollars. I haven't been able to pay my condo, my homeowners association for almost 10 months because I can't find bolivares and I can't send the dollars because there's no, bank to bank transferred. So I have to find someone that I can give the dollars so they can find the bolivares, and we cannot find bolivares.
Right.
So it's crazy that we're talking about this, and Venezuela pretends, or some people in Venezuela pretend this is something that's viable, when what I'm describing you is just a tiny bit of what I know from my side. Imagine the whole picture. So I don't know what you think about this, because I think it's just the assumption that everyone is in the same, conditions to assume this change. This is a shift. That's why there's so much resistance. I think my resistance is that I don't want to know about it, because I don't want to get engaged. Like, I don't want to start thinking that that's what I should do. So what do you think about this?
This, forgive me, every once in a while ideas pop into my mind. Okay. And you just popped a lot of ideas into my mind. Okay. Ideas popped into my mind because they connect both to my wife and to my closest discussion friend, who is one of the people you talked about, who used to do economic analysis for the oil industry, making it work in Venezuela. And then he left Venezuela. You might imagine why. And he is a very ethical person. He was not a greedy person out for money, but the changes in Venezuela were very hard to adapt to. At the same time, when my wife and I went to Chile, the Chile Consortium divided up our tasks in two parts. I got to talk about exports from Chile, which was a big issue, and the government of Chile was very interested under Bachelet. My wife said, no, we have plans for local cryptocurrencies and how they can be used to create autonomous local economies and how to make them work. So my wife studied in great technical detail how to make those kind of systems work. And I can't help wondering, gee, if Venezuela needs this kind of information, maybe we should bring her and Chile into it. I don't know.
That's a very interesting idea, because there are examples where cryptocurrency systems work in local economies if they're run properly. But the question mark is, to what extent does that only work when the local economy is able to insulate itself from the larger national economy? That is problematical, I think, and it probably explains why, unless there's a proper coordination between the national and the local economy, the thing will fall apart. The other issue that I thought was being related has to do with South American countries, Argentina and Chile and so on, and that is their mistake in linking their currency to the U.S. dollar rather than having their own currency. The economists say this has been a mistake. Certainly, it was a large mistake in Argentina and possibly Chile. And I'm not very knowledgeable about Chile.
We had more than Argentina had a 1-to-1 exchange rate for a long time, a fixed exchange rate until
the American dollar.
2000. Yeah, with the US dollar. Yeah. We had it at some point during the 80s, not a 1-to-1, but it was sort of a weird fix where it was in tranches. But we now have a free exchange rate.
But was it different than the Canadian US, where the Canadian dollar fluctuates?
Now it fluctuates. We also have to separate what we mean when we talk about cryptocurrencies, because one way to think about them is as a digital cash, where you just transfer digital value, but they're more than that. So they are that digital cash, but they also exist in a parallel system, which is the blockchain infrastructure. So what they enable is not just transacting, it's transacting outside of the banking system, right? So if you have a country or a community with very poorly managed banking system or expensive banking system with expensive international transfers, they can help you with that because they're a cheaper way to develop infrastructure. But if you have a very good working system, well, they're not going to help you much, right? Because if you have everyone in the country has a bank account, transfers within, at least in Chile, so you automatically have a bank account at the Chilean bank. So we have almost 100% banking penetration. You don't use it, but you have it. We have free transfer, which are instantaneous within retail accounts. So we don't really have a use for them, for cryptocurrencies as a means of payments because we have a very good payment system. But then in some local communities, maybe you don't have a banking branch, so it's going to be a problem. So you could use cryptocurrencies, or you could just use digital cash, and you could improve current banking systems in the area. The problem is, I mean, the good thing about cryptocurrencies, it's already developed. So it's just plug and play. You just download the software and it runs. Now, it doesn't run as well as it does in the banking because you have the whole banking infrastructure and you have banking regulations, and a lot of people have looked into cybersecurity and things like that. So there's a lot of money into it. So it's probably going to run better than a open source coder developed banking system, developed not by bankers but by coders. So it's going to be different and it's going to be less efficient, but it's another solution. Then it's not going to be one size fits all, I guess.
Yeah.
Let me ask a dumb question. Maria's talking about corruption. My understanding was that the best thing about blockchain is that it makes everything transparent. And I would have thought that would be a wonderful way of reducing corruption. If in fact, every local official has to post, yes, I bought this SUV, and everybody can see where the money went and where I got it, it should make it possible to reduce corruption. But am I just really assuming too much?
Well, it depends on how you develop the blockchain and the cryptocurrency. I mean, you could use blockchain and not have a cryptocurrency. So there are a lot of blockchain applications for government bids, where all the information is encrypted and it's kept encrypted until the actual bid opens or the bid closes. Then you reveal the contents and you can see all the bids at the time they came in, and you know that they haven't been tampered. So you can't favor your friend because all the information, it was publicly put into the blockchain and everyone can see when it went and under what terms. So there shouldn't be any tampering. So it's a good thing. But the counterpoint is that some of the cryptocurrency applications are meant to be anonymous. Not all of them are anonymous, but some are meant to be or try to be anonymous, where you can't link the identity of a user to a specific address, but that's by design. You could design something where each user has an address and you know what the user is. And if that's the case, then you could actually see all of them transactions. But then you go into privacy. I mean, do we want to know? I mean, I want to know if a corrupt politician is receiving money, but I don't know. I don't want to give that freedom for everyone see that I bought Starbucks 2 hours ago. So it's a very thin line between transparency and privacy.
I guess I don't understand what blockchain is.
Okay,
and
so
maybe you've been through that before.
no problem. Yes. So blockchain is a technology. It's a way to store data, and it's a very inefficient way to store data, but it's a very secure way to store it. Because what you're going to do is you're going to write blocks of information, and after you finish a block, you're going to write a summary of the block in the following block. So each block is going to be chained by a little residual of information or an image of the previous block.
I see.
And what that means that if you want to change the information on block 1 and you're currently in block 4, you have to change the information in block 1, block 2, block 3, block 4. Otherwise, they're not going to be consistent. You're going to be able to see that someone tampered with the information. And that also works best if there is also a replicated. So more than one person or that one entity has a copy of the blockchain. Otherwise, you just change all the blocks.
But if everyone has the same copy of the blockchain, they're going to say, hey, you changed block number 1 and blocks 1 through 4. All of us have a different block 1 through 4, so you're probably cheating. That's the benefit of blockchains, but they're inefficient because everyone has the same copy. You're replicating information.
And that's a small subset of what I would call cyber currencies.
Yikes.
And an example of a cyber currency, China has worked very hard to develop a new distributed ledger technology. And many people believe that China's more controlled and more secure form of money is in the process of taking over the whole damn world while we sleep and don't know what the hell we're doing. And I think that's a very serious concern. On the other hand, first grade blockchain is a huge energy user and it's a security problem. So this morning I was talking to the CEO of a new company, which is in Australia, which has a plan to try to solve these problems. And I told this guy, my God, you're the new Elon Musk. and that's good and bad. There are good and bad things about Elon Musk. He's the whole package. Okay. And his company is developing a pack. Well, I could send you the word. It's, but the bottom line is they have concepts which will beautifully solve some of these social and economic problems much better than Elon Musk ever did under an assumption. And the assumption is that modern cryptography works. And it turns out modern cryptography works under certain assumptions. And so this system can vastly improve security, economic transactions, fairness, democracy. My God, it's a great package out of Australia, which I learned about this morning. And I will be happy to send Metas more of what I've learned. But the problem is modern cryptography is not going to be secure for the future. And there are people at the NSA who several years ago made plans on the assumption it will be secure forever, except for when they break it. Once you create an exception, it automatically becomes a more difficult game, to put it mildly.
Right.
An unbelievable game in this world. But the bottom line is that there are things called backdoors, both in software and in hardware. And the US is not the only place that knows about it. There are times when people in the NSA will try to say, hey, we want to keep this secret from everybody. And so nobody in the United States will know it, but everybody in China will, everybody in Russia will. And it doesn't do you a lot of good if everybody in China and Russia knows how to break your systems and nobody in your own country knows how they work. This is a really serious problem. So I said to the guy who's running this company, I support your company. You are doing great things that should be expanded. There are problems that need to be solved in this whole world of digital transactions. But on the other hand, we need a phase 2 to begin tomorrow in parallel to really work hard on these back doors in the software and in the hardware. And that requires some advanced technologies, and we got to start working on them in an open international way, which is safe. And that's a little tricky when you got 15 intelligence agencies, each thinking it's their own monopoly. It's a little hard, but we really need a way to develop these next generation technologies in an international, safe, controlled way.
Well, I have heard that the rise of quantum computing will make cryptography completely impossible, because those things can quickly find every password you can possibly invent. And is that relevant to what you're talking about, or is it?
Absolutely relevant and absolutely true. And your guys might appreciate it if I just tell an old man's story, because if I throw equations on the board, people won't enjoy that as much. Old man's story. I was in Korea a few years ago. I got to speak to the Minister of Science and all kinds of great people in Korea. And they were telling me, here are our plans. We're really going to dominate this blockchain world. And here's what we're going to do. What do you think? Is it impregnable? I said, well, I know how to do a quantum computer where overnight you switch in one day from owning most of the world to owning nothing. And here's the way the quantum computing works. The price of Bitcoin dropped by 30% that day.
Because
I
of
don't
what
believe
you
it was a
said?
coincidence because they had plans, they had investments in the works.
Sorry,
The bottom line is, yes, the quantum technology can crack the cryptography, which all of these schemes are based on.
Paula, it crashed that much because of what you told them?
I believe so. That's my personal guess.
Well,
I can't prove it.
I hope you didn't tell them anything this week, because this week it's been down 20%. So please don't talk to them anymore.
It wasn't the Koreans I was in touch with, but I was talking to some people.
And what do you think? Because what we're discussing here is that new technology, new hardware is going to be able to decode or decrypt something that was coded with the previous hardware, right? But isn't there also the possibility of developing quantum encryption or levels of encryptions that were not available before because we didn't have the hardware for it?
It's actually that's a good point. And there are aspects I just haven't talked about with other people. I want to thank you guys and Meta for creating this conversation, because some of this stuff, it's just hard to talk about, just the way life goes. But with the group this morning, I said I've been counting on a new kind of technology, which I call quantum artificial general intelligence. And to be honest, I even have a patent pending on that, and have talked to a couple of good lawyers who really think it can be patented. I've been thinking of it in terms of, we will have an international treaty. We will develop this QAGI in an open source, but scientifically rigorous way, which is critical because there are a lot of liars and fakers in this kind of industry.
Oh, dear.
Yeah. If you've ever heard people talking about quantum neural nets, oh my God, the frauds and the fakes that I had to see when I worked at NSF, there were so many frauds, I'm feeling very quantum this morning because I had a good glass of coffee, But the fact is, there is a real science, but you have to be very rigorous to get to the real science and not the BS. But I was hoping we would have a good, rigorous international process under the new Existential Threats Office to really develop this quantum AGI technology and develop it in such a way that it can detect backdoors in hardware, so you can prevent people losing all their money because of a backdoor in the chip they bought. And that's a really serious issue. We've had a lot of really massive cybersecurity problems the last couple of years due to backdoors in chips, which our present sandbox bromium technologies cannot handle. And we have those security technologies, they just didn't work. They weren't powerful enough. We can build a quantum technology to do that job. But what these guys pointed out was that your quantum AGI is basically a big centralized computer design.
Yeah.
And they asked, could you decentralize quantum neural networks to perform the same function without centralizing power? I haven't had a chance to think about that. And now you have raised a second question. Hey, can we use quantum AGI for security, for God's sake, to encode the message so that you can't crack it? And I haven't even really thought about that. I mean, you posed the question today, and I haven't really thought about it. And not a lot of people know how this stuff works. So I don't think anyone's really thought about it. But I tend to think we don't need this extra wrinkle. I think that once you have open, transparent systems and you can catch anybody who tries to break them, that's probably what we need to keep the world economy going, which it isn't doing now, as you know.
No, it's in big trouble.
Yeah. And it's not just Chile that's in economic trouble this week.
I don't know how to support a regime change. I mean, I don't know how you implement that. From the outside, it's very difficult to me to see how can things change in Venezuela unless there's a regime change. And I don't see any triggers for that regime change unless there is like a complete change in the energy system and Venezuela can no longer get money from petrol. I don't know.
Meaning getting rid of Maduro is the name of the game.
Yes.
I wouldn't say that in public.
Yeah.
So my concern is that there is a very difficult financial situation in Venezuela. It's not the hyperinflation that we saw. It's not that bad, but since it's improved a little, people see like things are getting better, and the government is using that to create this narrative that things can get better. We're allowing you to use dollars because dollars are the currency, not the official currency, but it's the currency. I can't find bolivares. People can't find bolivares, which is our legal currency. We can't find it. So the thing is that people are, or at least some are convinced that things can get better even under this political, situation. So if they try to fix things with the oil industry, this approach by the Biden administration didn't land well, among other reasons, because the oil industry is really in very bad shape. I just read yesterday that they were buying oil from Iran. I mean, Venezuela has been buying gas for a long time since I lived there. So we have an industry that is not capable of doing anything. How are we going to, or how is Venezuela going to make a transition to these type of currencies? If you can't have a minimal legitimate market, that's what I'm trying to figure. How are they going to do this?
Let me ask a clarification. What you're saying, you're questioning a Biden proposal. I'm not sure what the Biden proposal is, so I want that clarified. But also, I'm not sure why they're doing it. I've heard that because Europe is in such trouble trying to get out from under its purchase of Russian gas and oil, Biden is trying to come to terms with Venezuela and try to get Venezuela to up its exports to try to make up for this shortage. So
I don't think so, Meta.
No,
Venezuela doesn't have the capability, not even to supply what the U.S. was buying from Russia. It's a very, very, very small amount of oil barrels. So I don't think so. What I think is that Biden was trying to show Russia that they can play this game. Like Russia is in Latin America, China is in Latin America. They are both players among this leftist alliance.
Yes, right.
And Biden was trying to, I'm back. America is back. So America is back is I'm here. I'm trying to recover the space that was left by the previous administration. We can play this game too. I think that was part of it. And the other part of it, in my understanding, is that Biden wants to push for the diplomatic kind of approach. He wants to reactivate the negotiations in Mexico, and he was just trying to push a little bit of that. He got something in exchange to prisoners, American, and a legal permanent resident who were, there are others. There are like a handful of in Venezuela. They're under arrest.
where?
In Caracas. They're in
Okay.
Venezuela. Yeah, they're under arrest. Some of them are being prosecuted. So the Biden administration got 2 of them released. So I think it was a little bit of everything, but I'm not sure Biden really or his administration thinks that Venezuela can be an oil provider in this crisis. I don't think they are in the position to do that. And from what I understand, the White House is not on the same page with the State Department. So there are some inner,
I'm glad to hear somebody sees that.
Well, I don't see it. That's what I've heard.
Oh, well, no, that's interesting.
I'm not an insider. I'm just,
What have you heard?
observing things.
What have you heard? It makes sense.
That they're not looking at the same apparently, and I can understand this from Biden advisors, they want a more diplomatic approach, not soft, diplomatic approach. The State Department, it understands it has to be a little bit of carrot and stick kind of approach. So they're not necessarily looking at it from the same perspective. I think it's good because you can come up with a middle, kind of a solution that is not just giving them legitimacy, but it can also push. I do believe in a negotiated kind of, outcome, but I don't see that in the immediate future. So all this talk about Venezuela going crypto or doing this or doing that because to circumvent the sanctions, because that's the whole point. This is what Maduro wants. He just needs to find a way to avoid the effects of the sanctions. So crypto and everything that's associated with these currencies, that's what he needs. That's my understanding. Maybe I'm wrong.
Could Russia use crypto for the same purpose, that is getting around the much toughened sanctions? Now, I may be steering this question off where the rest of you want to go, so ignore my question if you have another thing on your mind.
It's difficult to evade sanctions at a large scale using Bitcoin because Bitcoin is traceable, and you can block Bitcoin addresses. There are OFAC addresses that some exchanges are not allowing to, they don't receive Bitcoins that come from these addresses or that at some point in their history have passed through these addresses. We have already identified addresses that work as mixers, where you pull a lot of transactions and try to launder money. We already know those addresses, so this list keeps getting bigger and bigger, so you can trace it. It's not the best currency to do it. There are others that offer full anonymity, but those are not widely used. So it's not a good way to launder a lot of money. If you need a lot of money, it's better to use diamonds and an airplane. That's are still the problem. The problem is how do you get from the cryptocurrency to something else, or how you get from diamonds to other currency. That's the problem with laundering money through blockchains, is that you still need to get money at some point.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And that's where you can regulate. Is that when you're talking about how Bitcoin can undermine the banking system? Is that where the issue arises, that the trading of real money for blockchain imaginary money has to be regulated, but that there's a difficulty in that? Or
yeah, that's the economists have said it's a tool for laundering money.
No, I think the biggest problem
the Bitcoin that is its problem with any system where there's anonymity.
Okay, what's the solution? I think Hugo is more optimistic that it can be solved, or am I mistaken?
I am optimistic because I think as a society, we're going to figure out, this is just technology, right? So you can use technology for good, for bad. Right now, we have a basic knowledge of this technology, and it's being developed as a banking tool by developers. Once we get enough banking industry into this technology, they're probably going to be able to improve the current banking systems using this new technology. And I think that's where it's going to be regulated, and we're going to see fewer scams. But at the end, it's still open source technology, so anyone can develop anything. And if the public is willing to believe that if they buy Hugo coin, they're going to get rich, well, it's very difficult to prevent them from doing so, because they're going to believe that if they send X amount of money to my address, I'm going to give them Hugo coin and they're going to be rich. I mean, that's what you're dealing with, and that's very difficult to regulate. You need to educate and tell them, no, that's not the case. But then you look at what has happened, and many people have become rich by buying, I don't know, Dogecoin or other type of coin.
Yes,
so
the winners.
It's difficult. You hear about the winners, you don't hear about the losers.
Right.
Mhm.
But I'm still optimistic because it's technology. I think there's more good people than bad people, and good will overcome. I don't know.
Oh, boy. And listen, I don't think that's true anymore. At least twice a day, I get a phone call from somebody saying this is the Visa telling you that your card is compromised and somebody's used it.
I get those every day.
Or some other phishing thing on the computer. And there are more thieves in the world than I could possibly have imagined. And there doesn't seem to be any progress in defending people from them. I mean, I talked to one guy who's a computer expert at Harvard, and he was just saying what is obvious, that defense is much more difficult than offense now in computer security issues. That
Yeah.
you just can't protect yourself. There's no way of catching these thieves. They can get away with it, with anything for years. I hear the same woman who's been calling me for 3 years. She's still gotten away with it,
Right.
And so I don't know what to do, but it strikes me that the whole world of computing is really based on a kind of hopefulness that I don't share anymore.
There are far too many examples of misplaced technology.
Maria, Paul, Hugo, do you think technology is going to save us?
No, I think technology is not going to do it. I think what regime change is all about is changing our political system to a genuine democratic system. And that's a matter of sociology and education training, which is completely outside the financial realm. Financial instruments are very poor.
Yeah, but I mean, if we
At
can
achieving results.
the internet for everything that we depend on, and I certainly every day, and my whole life depends on the accuracy of the internet, and
The internet,
or so, then I don't see how we can keep going unless we get an improved system of defensive strategies for cybersecurity.
the internet is a failed media system in the context of democracy. It's infinitely worse than television, and that was bad enough with respect to the abandonment of the print media as the dominant media in our democracy.
So let me respond to your question. I don't know who is the most pessimistic, but I'm in between. I do not accept that things have to be bad, but I don't accept that they have to be good. And I'm amused. I've had a lot of conversations with a guy named Vint Cerf, who gets credit for being the inventor of the internet. And in a sense,
yes.
that's really true. And we've had some discussions. But frankly, a lot of what we're seeing is the new valuation, economic control, intelligence technology. And I claim I got more credit for that. I know how that stuff works. And you can use it for good and you can use it for evil. But a lot of the problems we have now are not at that level. We have problems already with simpler technology. It doesn't have to be super intelligent to be scary and problematic. And we're already in the problematic and scary phase of the internet already.
Yeah.
When it comes to these backdoors, there are the software backdoors and there are the hardware backdoors. For the software backdoors, it seems impossible. The reason why it seems impossible, it's scary because I can mention a specific name. There was a specific person at the NSA by the name of Mike Rogers. And that specific person, I'm not revealing a secret. He's testified before Congress on how he wanted to develop the future of the internet. It's the testimony of Mike Rogers. I saw it on television. I also saw it in other places. And he basically said, I don't believe in your defensive technology. Before him, the NSA was developing the defensive technologies, and they are known, but they have been repressed. Mike Rogers said, we don't want defensive technologies out there. We want to survive based on mutual assured destruction.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, he testified before Congress. And there are hearings you can see on the web, for God's sake. And somebody said, well, what happens if failure to secure our power grid, which he is responsible for, what if the failure to really secure our power grid against software backdoors, what if it causes massive damage in a US city and the Russians and Chinese know how? And he said, it's simple. The right strategy is mutual assured destruction. We want your authority. We want permission that if they shut down a town in Iowa, we can shut down St. Petersburg.
Right.
And there were people in Congress who agreed. And God help me, Trump supported this guy. He said, yeah, we want to be able to shut down St. Petersburg. They don't mention the fact the U.S. power grid is different from the Russian. and offensive strategy hurts the U.S. much more than it hurts Russia. And so the bottom line is there is a technology which is well known around the world outside the U.S. called the Rainbow Book technology. And I saw it when it was first developed 40 years ago. I built software systems that ran on this kind of secure platform. It started with really the Honeywell Multic system with the Orange Book. And there was a guy at Amherst who developed that. He was my friend until he died. And then it continued. But the bottom line is there is Rainbow Book technology for how to build compilers which guarantee that the software will not have a certain kind of backdoor. And the technology for doing that, it does require a certain amount of digital verification technology you got to add. But basically, we can do this. It's just we haven't done it.
And why haven't we not done it since it's 40 years old?
Okay, so this is politics. My short answer to the politics is, hey, first, I don't know everything that's happened in the secure black world in the last 20 years. If I claimed to know it, I'd be an incredible liar. But what I see kind of points to Mike Rogers.
Yeah. Okay. Mad.
Okay, this is a whole different world that we just opened up here.
Yes.
But our time is not only up, but way over time. I'm going to have to do
I
some.
hope my time will not be up after I've made some enemies here.
You haven't made any enemies. You've made big friends always.
Yes.
We love
Right.
you.
Yeah.
But the
For
time
something completely different.
So to be continued another time, another constellation of guests probably. But thank you all very much. This is fascinating, and appreciate it very much. Okay, take care.
Bye now.
Thank you, Meta. Nice meeting you all. Bye.
Project Save the World produces one of these shows 3 days a week and sometimes more. This is episode number 448. You can watch these or listen to them as audio podcasts on our website, tosavetheworld.ca. Eventually, we even post transcripts there. When you get to that website, look around because we have conversations going on there all the time about 6 global issues, plus potential reforms in governance, economics, and civil society. To find a particular talk show, enter its title or episode number in the search bar, or the name of one of the guest speakers. After you've watched or listened, scroll down and share your thoughts about the show with the other viewers. This is a place for dialogue, so please join in. I'll see you there.